Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It is now 12 o'clock and wanted to take a moment. My name is Darby Jago. I am one of the product managers here at Learning Tree, and we appreciate you taking some time today to join Learning Tree International for our Power BI Unlocking the Value of Your Data Through Business Intelligence webinar, presented to you by Learning Tree author and instructor John Uni. So thanks so much for joining. Before we start, I do want to take a quick moment to introduce you to the Learning Tree Anywhere platform. If you've ever participated in a Learning Tree class as a live virtual attendee, you'll recognize this layout, as this is what we use in our Learning Tree courses. So you'll see that our presenter, John, is in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Below John is our chat box. Looks like everyone's saying good morning, Los Angeles. I know I'm in Virginia. It's cold here today, not LA. So you'll see the chat box there, and this is where you can participate with questions or comments. And then in the top middle, you'll see the presentation. And below that, we've posted some poll questions, and I'll go ahead and leave those there if you want to take a moment to answer the poll if you haven't already. I'd love to know more about you. And then, John, if you want to take a moment and introduce yourself and then get started with the webinar, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, I will do. So, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're from, whatever time zone you're in. It is late here in the UK, late and dark and wet and horrible. So, as you can see from the introduction, I was in the military. I was in the Royal Air Force, aircraft engineer, worked on various types of aircraft. And then at a certain point in my career, I decided to move into data and IT. So I was a data scientist and a data engineer before those terms were really coined. I didn't know I was a data scientist until a few years ago. But the military needed experts in their fields of work to work with the aircraft data. So we did mathematical modeling, spares modeling, whole life cost models, stuff like that. I also got involved in programming, data manipulation, databases, and that's where my background in IT really started to flourish. When I left the Air Force, I then became a contractor, a consultant, and I've worked with lots of organizations, including NATO, the United Nations, the UK government, the police, and various other MOD for different countries, so the UK, the Swedish, the Finnish, and American DOD as well. I had a great session working with the TFD group who sent me to California, so I was in Monterey and Carmel for several months, for several years. That was a really cool contract. And I've been a Learning Tree instructor for 20 plus years, just 20 years in December, and an MCT, I think it's coming up for 5 years now, 4 to 5 years, but I've been a Microsoft certified trainer for a while. So that's me. You can find out more if you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, totally up to you if you do that. Let me just move this out of my way. You can't see it, but I can. Okay, so let's just have a quick discussion about what Power BI is, or what is Power BI. So it's classified as a self-service data visualization tool, as are many other tools like Tableau, ClickView, and other ones of that genre. It consists of software services, apps, and connectors. Users regain control over their data with minimum or no involvement of the IT department. That's one of the benefits of these tools. It can happen, it doesn't have to happen. I'm hearing someone speaking.
Yeah.
But if you could not speak, please. If you could find out who that is, Darby, and then mute them, that'd be cool. So visualizations. We have the Power BI desktop, and that's a free application that you can install on your computer. And I'll talk more about where we can get that from. So the great thing with Power BI and these other tools is that you can connect to multiple different data sources. You can then combine those data sources to create a data model. And Power BI will connect to almost any data source at all. Sometimes I'm asked, why do we do a data model? It's the data exploration is faster, aggregations are simpler to build with a data model, reports are more accurate, And the report's less time to write and create, and they're easier to maintain. Those are the main benefits of creating a data model. You can save your Power BI reports to either the Power BI service, which is in the cloud, that's powerbi.com. It's a cloud-based system, or the Power BI server. If it's installed on premises, that's your side of the firewall in case you're in an organization that doesn't like or can't save their data to the cloud for purposes, perhaps governmental or defense or whatever it might be. So the Power BI server behaves like an SSRS server for those of you who have used SQL Server reporting services. Behaves like it, looks like it, feels like it, and gets installed similar to it as well. And then the visualizations that you create in Power BI desktop, when it's saved up to the Power BI service, can then be used in a standalone report or a tile on a dashboard. Okay, so the target users, not just for this webinar, but also for the tools, we've got business intelligence specialists or super users, people who write, who create, who build these reports, build the dashboards, save them up to the service or the server, and make them available for users to interact with. We've also got administrators that we don't mention here, not that they're not important, but these are the target users. Administrators will then give people access to those dashboards and reports and various other administrative functions within those tools. Managers can use the reports and the dashboards to gain information and make intelligent decisions based on current data and trends. So looking at the sales perhaps, or market trends, or whatever it might be, maybe even looking at, the trends in a nuclear reactor or whatever it might be, and make decisions based on what they're seeing. Then other business users who consume that information to help them do their jobs. They're not BI specialists, they're not super users, but they're important to the business. And the dashboards and reports that are created are used by those users to help them do their jobs. Okay, so let's position Power BI in the BI space. Here we're looking at a couple of slides, well, a couple of pictures on this slide that Gartner produced. One from 2019, one from 2020. So Gartner provide annual reports on all sorts of technologies. This is the BI analytics programs one. So it's the Gartner BI Magic Quadrant for analytics and business analytics programs. You can see Power BI, i.e. Microsoft, have consistently taken the top position. Even when you go back a few years, they take the top position. Tableau are keeping up with Microsoft, and Tableau are doing a great job as well, but Microsoft are ahead. So you can see in the top right-hand quadrant there, the leaders, bottom left-hand quadrant are the niche players, and the further up you are, the more of a leader, of a visionary that you are. We're due one out in February, so Gartner will release another one, so I'll be interested to see where the gap is, if Tableau have closed up or whatever it might be. There are lots of other organizations that you can see in there. We've got some nice clusters there. We've got Oracle are beginning to really get into this marketplace, and I think you'll see them come up fairly soon as well. So it's always good, and Microsoft and Tableau and other providers will push these images out for people to see how good their product is. So we'll see that in the next month or so. The Power BI infrastructure is really is a quick discussion about the Power BI infrastructure. So Power BI will take data from anywhere, and if there is something that you can't get your data from, new connectors are being added in each release of Power BI, and it's released on a very regular basis. It's monthly, and if you've not seen any of the videos, they used to do videos about them, and then they started doing other types of releases on YouTube and on Microsoft's channels. So there are some really interesting videos that show you where they've been and where they get to. There's a lot to watch, but some interesting information in there. So if you're unable to get your data, you can guarantee there'll be connectors being created for new products. You can see down the left-hand side, text files, Excel files, access files. So text files could be CSV, comma separated values, could be XML, could just be plain text, could be JSON, could be all sorts of different text files. Excel, we all know and love Excel. Access being a desktop database, and then the two DBMSs two enterprise level DBMSs we mentioned, SQL Server and Oracle. It can interact with those really well. And then we've got big data at the bottom there. And all that data can be taken into Power BI Desktop. And you can either take a single snapshot of data. So for instance, we might have an Excel workbook that has a single table in it or a single worksheet in it. And we can pull that in and interact with it. Or we might have an Excel workbook that has 4, 5, 6, 7 worksheets that are all related. We want to pull those in and treat it like it's a database. So we can pull it in and create a data model from it. And we'll do that in some of the demos that come up. You can see that from Power BI Desktop, it can be saved to the Power BI service, the cloud-based one, or Power BI Server, which is the version your side of the firewall. And then it can be consumed by Power BI Desktop, by the Power BI mobile devices. So we can download Power BI Mobile on Android, on Apple devices. And then we've got other visualization. So for instance, you can visualize it from your desktop or from other tools. The other one that is here that I've not mentioned yet is the Power BI Gateway. Often we're asked, how do we refresh our data in the Power BI service? The service is in the cloud, my data is on my system. How does it get refreshed? Well, we have the ability to create gateways to the data. Two different types, which I'll talk about in the next slide as well. We've got the personal gateway or the organizational gateway. But that's Power BI services route back to the data. Obviously, with the Power BI server, we're in our firewall anyway, and as long as your data is on the same network as the Power BI server, then we can refresh that anyway. So some of the components of the Power BI architecture. So I just want to list some of these out. So data sources, we've talked about some data sources. We talked about data sources like Excel, flat files. We mentioned some databases, but we didn't mention online services. It will connect up to online services, especially if you're using the service. It'll connect up to online services, it'll connect up to Azure, and it'll connect up to lots of other different types of data sources. Power BI Desktop, okay, we can download that from several places, from Microsoft's website, from the powerbi.com website, or from the marketplace. And the marketplace is the best place to download it from, because it will, every time they push out a new release, it will update on your system. But Power BI Desktop took Power Query, Power Maps, Power Pivot, and Power View, all those power tools that were in Excel, came into Excel in about version 2010, and it took those and it encapsulated them in a tool by themselves. You know, Power Pivot, Power Query, Power Maps, really powerful in Excel, but it takes it to a next level when it gets into Power BI. We also have Q&A, questions and answers, where you can ask English-like questions of your data, and it will respond and give you English-like answers. That does depend on structure, on how you structure your tables and how you name your tables and your fields, but it's not overly difficult to do, and it's really powerful, and users do like it. We mentioned the Power BI service, that's the cloud. So when you download Power BI, you can download it unlicensed, and you can use it, and you can share Power BI files, and whoever else has Power BI can open it. But for any of you who have ever done that, I'm sure you understand that it's fraught with danger, fraught with problems, because as files get passed around, people can make changes. They can also inadvertently delete the master file, or you can have many files with the same name with different versions, and you don't know which is the live version. And that's where these collaboration tools come in. So the Power BI service, collaborating in the cloud, share and publish reports, create dashboards, gives you security, the ability to schedule and refresh your data, and a lot more as well. The Power BI server is the same idea, but it's installed within your firewall. You can share and publish reports. Notice it doesn't say dashboards. Currently, the Power BI report server doesn't allow dashboards. That will come in time, I'm sure. And the Power BI report server and the Power BI desktop are a different version. So it's a different version of desktop for the server than it is for service. So you have to load a different version of Power BI Desktop because, again, it's slightly behind the development curve. Mentioned the gateway. You can have an organizational gateway where anybody can connect to it, and it can connect to lots of different products, or a personal gateway, which, for instance, if I was the only person working on this data, I could have a personal gateway and it would be just for me and just for Power BI. And that allows me to connect to on-site data. We mentioned the Power BI mobile app, so Android, iOS, and then obviously if we have Power BI on our laptop, then it's not a mobile app, but we might have it on some other type of device. And then for the developers out there, .NET developers or other development tools, there are Power BI Embedded provides APIs which allow us to embed reports into custom applications. It's a very complex thing and it's very technical, so that's as much as I'm going to say about it. But it is out there, the APIs are available and people are creating custom applications. Okay. For those of you who are raising your hands, if you put your questions in the chat pod, that would be the way to do it, because we'll take the questions at the end of the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick demo of Power BI Desktop leading into Power BI Service. This is the Power BI Desktop. This is just my lead-in to prepare me for my demo. But there are a number of recognized steps that people follow all the time when working with Power BI and working with Power BI data. So you connect your data, including multiple data sources. You might get data from a text file, from a database like SQL Server, and from Outlook or SharePoint. You combine them all together. You then shape your data using the Power Query Editor, which is, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a little bit of work in Power Query Editor. You then create a data model, and we'll see a data model as well from an Excel workbook. And then from that data model, you create your visualizations and your reports. You then share them to either the Power BI service or the Power BI server. And I'm going to do a quick demo of those steps. Okay. So let me get this to the point where I want to be, which is here. And let me bring up my, okay, that's the service at the moment. But let me just go to, I'm just going to minimize that. I'll come back to the service shortly. I'm going to maximize my screen so we all get a full screen view of my desktop. Hopefully that should do that. Excellent. That's as maximized as it can be on for yourselves. And I'm going to fire up Power BI. Okay, I've got some files on the system that I can use for demos. I'm going to use one that's based on the old Northwind database because it's an easy model to understand, or straightforward, let's say. And what I don't want to do is to get into really complex models so that it hides what we're trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to close that. That's the Get Data window when you open up, or the lead-in window. And when I click on Get Data, it will come back. But I just want to show you the interface first. So as I said, Power BI gets refreshed once a month. New capabilities that it's able to do. And this, I'm not sure exactly when this front came in, because I've been using a previous version. This is the most up-to-date version, but this is quite a nice lead-in here. So it's saying get some data to your and add it to your report. We haven't got any data, so that's what we need to do. Okay, you can see up here, it's all about data. We can get data from here. So there's the common data sources. You can go to a web and scrape data from a website as well, an OData feed as well. I'm going to click on more. Give it a few seconds to generate it. So this is all of the data connection types that I can use. So you can see Excel, text, XML, JSON. I can go to a folder, which means I can then pull in multiple files from a folder. So if I've got multiple XML files or Excel files, which all have the same format, I can use those and pull them all in at the same time. Lots of other ones here, so I'll just scroll through them, not at a speed where you can actually, make any real decisions from it, but just to show you there are a lot of connection types. And like I said, they provide more and more each time. Somebody did ask me, can you use Python? There's a Python script here, there's an R script, we can use those as well. Okay, so let me cancel that just now. I'm going to just show you a little bit more here. So when I pull the data in, this here is my canvas where it says add data to your report. This will disappear and we'll have a blank canvas and we'll be able to create visualizations on it. My data can be viewed here and my model can be viewed here. So we'll see that all in play in a second. Over here are the visualizations I can use. Now, there are a number of predefined visualizations, and again, more and more get added each time. Some really powerful ones, and we've got Q&A as well. I can pull in other visuals, so if I just click on here, I can get more visuals. So I'm just going to click on that, get more visuals. We're not going to pull one in, but I just want to show you there's a whole marketplace of visuals out there. And the ones that have got a tick next to them have been verified by Microsoft to not do anything unusual, okay? So we don't want anything doing unusual with our data. So it doesn't bleed out the data or copy the data anywhere. So there's lots of different types of visuals that are available here. Okay, I'm not going to do anything with them. I just wanted to show you that. So for instance, bullet chart. That's one I have used. It's pretty good. So let's close that. So I can get more visuals, lots of more visuals. But let's go and get some data. So I'm going to get some Excel data. And I'm going to choose the East Wind Customers one. And we'll see this as soon as I pull it in. Click on Open. Okay, so I've got a number of worksheets and a number of tables. You can see the tables are not very well named. And generally, that can happen. We can get data with poorly named tables and poorly named fields. And one of the things we should do, and we will do when we get there, is we should rename these tables so that there's something that our users would understand. Okay, and even within there, we should update some of the field names to something that's more meaningful for our users as well. Okay, so if I click on load, which I'm not going to do, but if I click on load, then that'll take the data straight into Power BI, into that interface that you're seeing. But if I click on transform data, that takes it into Power Query. And Power Query allows me to make some quite dramatic changes to the data. Okay, so I've got 5 tables that I've pulled in. I just did a check mark next to them. And if I click on the table, I can see the data that's related to the table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to just get rid of all the spurious stuff at the front and just call it customers. Okay, that makes more sense. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to go into, call that one order details. Now the thing to point out here is, for those of you who are technical, this is not a data warehouse. These are just related tables. And while they came in Excel, they can also come in other forms as well. We might bring them in from Access or SQL Server or somewhere like that. It is based on an organization that sells stuff. So we've got customers that place an order. An order can consist of multiple lines, so order details. And then in the order details, we link to a product. But we also have this extra table here, table 5, which is contacts. So I can see it's contacts. So I'm going to change its name to contacts. Okay, so we've got a number of tables. So those tables are better named. I think my users would understand those better. Now the next thing is if there are a number of columns that I'm not going to use for any visualization and I'm not going to use for any other reason, then I should get rid of them, because all we do is we bloat our Power BI file. We bloat the data that we're moving about. So let us come across here. I'm certainly not going to use phone, and I'm not going to use fax on customer. So I've just selected both of those columns with the control key, and then I'm going to remove those columns. Okay, so let's remove these. You can see there's lots of options that are available to us. Okay, if I then have a look across, I think that's fairly good for that one. But if I come down to orders next, so you can see I've got some dates in here. I've got order date, I've got required date, I've got shipped date, employee number. I might leave that in there. If I want my employees' information, I'd have to bring in another table, because if we look at customers, we've got a customer ID. If I look at orders, it's got a customer ID column. That's how those two tables relate to each other. So I've got to have a relationship between those two tables so that I know what orders a customer makes, okay? So if I come back to order details, we've got my order ID and product ID. Well, we've got a products table, we've got an orders table. So this would link to the key in the orders table. Product ID would link to the products table. But if I just keep coming across, in fact, we were in orders, weren't we? Keep coming across. I don't have any way of displaying my employee information, but perhaps I'm going to get that from a different data source. So I'll leave that one in. But if I come to the very right, we've got ship via freight. I'm not going to use any of these in my visualization, so I'm just going to delete them all. So I'm now going to use the shift key to select all those columns. I'm going to right click, I'm going to remove those columns. And that just removes them out of my data table and out of my data model. Okay, so while I'm here, let me just show you here, we've got 1, 2, 3 tells me that it is a numeric column. Okay, we can see it's a numeric column. ABC tells me it's a string, we'll call it string column. Okay, it's text. So it could be numeric and text together or just text. Got employee, which is 1, 2, 3. You've got order date, which is a date. We can have date times. We can have all sorts of different types. Okay, so we were making, while I'm doing this, I'm also making sure that my column types are correct, and that's good for that. If I go to products, got my product key, that's of type 1, 2, 3, supplier ID, category ID. I'm going to leave the rest in, okay, and then we're just going to accept that. Okay, so to get it back into Power BI, I can close and apply. So close means close Power Query, apply means apply the changes and push the data into Power BI. So let's close and apply that. Give it a few seconds, it doesn't take long. If you ever see that message at the top where it says there are pending changes, that means that data has changed. You can choose to click on it and apply it, but because I came from Power Query, it applied it for me. Okay, so first things first, let's have a look at some data. Here's my tables. Okay, so we've got contacts, customers, order details, orders, products, as we had before. So if I come across to here, this allows me to see the data. Okay, so now I can click on customers. We saw it in Power Query, but of course I don't want to be jumping back to Power Query to see my data all the time. So here's my data for customers, okay? And if I go to back to report, okay, we've got order details and we've got orders. So if I just open up order details, there's a few things to point out here. There are certain columns that we would not aggregate, okay? So this is saying all my columns in here are aggregatable. I wouldn't aggregate a product ID. That's what the sigma sign is. I wouldn't aggregate my order ID, so I can actually tell it that that's not aggregatable if I want to do that. Okay, so where it says summarization, I've clicked on the actual column. Where it says summarization, I can drop that down. I can say don't summarize. I'll do the same for product ID. I won't do it on all the tables, but I'll do it on this just to show you what I'm doing. Because that then means that it won't sum those up. It will use them as if they are a text type field, okay? Also, quantity times unit price, that gives me the cost of a line. So there's lots of places where I can actually insert a new column. I can do it here. I can do it in Power Query. So let's go to, I want to go to modeling, okay? And I'm going to insert a new column. And we're just going to do a column here, and it's using a DAX language, but DAX, especially at the more straightforward side, is much like Excel, okay, much like Excel functions. So I'm just going to do one quick DAX function. I'm going to call it line cost. That's what I think of it as. I think that's from my military days. And I'm going to say it equals, so it's order details. So you can see order details is coming in down here. So I can scroll down and find it. So I'm going to go quantity times, get shift 8, yeah, thank you. order details. I don't know what happened there, but we'll take it back. And we want quantity times unit price. And then I just press enter, and it will save a column called line cost. Notice the different icon. Line cost is a calculated column. Okay, calculated column. So if I come back to my data, it's all looking good. Yeah, if I come back to the data for a second, and we go back to order details. So line cost is a calculated column. It's for every single row. So I've now, when I save this, it's going to save extra data every single row. Okay. All right, so back to here. Let's do some calculations. So let's bring, I'm going to use a card to begin with. So let's pop the card on here. Pop that there. I'm going to put line cost into the card. And what this does is it sums everything up. So all of the line costs have been summed up and they come to 1.35 million. Okay, as I, and I'm going to do this now, as I put in, well, I'm going to create another, and I'm going to let it do it automatically. So I'm going to click on line cost. So if I'm on here and I start to change the visualizations, it will change this visualization. So a habit to get into is to just click on the canvas, select line cost. Up comes my line cost. So by default, if it's aggregatable, it will create a column chart. Okay. Notice it's quite difficult to read because it's quite a small visualization, but in here, I'm clicking on format. If I click on format, I can then change the x-axis. I come down to the text size. Let's make it 12. And if I go to the y, I know there's nothing on x-axis at the moment, but there will be later. If I then go to the y-axis and make that 12 as well, we'll see I'll take it up even further. I'll go to 14. So you can see the text size is actually getting bigger. I won't bother with the axis label. They're all in here. They're all in format. Okay. So I've got that. Yeah. So that's a, well, let's take my line cost for my customers. So I'll take company name. Okay. So now I've got a table. So because I've chosen a text field, it provides a table. I'm then going to put my line cost in there. So I can drag it or I can select it. And notice it gives me something that's unusual. I'm going to just make this a bit bigger by clicking in here. Let's go again to the grid. I'm just going to make the grid bigger this time, just so you can see it. It's showing less data, but it's all about the text size. It's giving me a very strange set of numbers. So we did some work in Power Query, but what we didn't do was make sure that our data model is good. Okay, so I'm going to now flick to the data model, and we'll see. I'm going to upgrade to the new one. It's nice. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to actually connect up. So let me do that. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm using my mouse wheel to zoom in. So you can see contacts isn't connected, but that's okay. That's not affecting our price. Here we've got order details. So it's got my order ID and order. I know order is the primary key for orders, and I know my order ID is the foreign key for order details. I need to connect those together. And if I'm working with products, I've got to connect product ID with my product ID. Now, obviously they've been misnamed on purpose, but you find data like that all the time. So now if I put my cursor over here, we can see what we're connecting to. Okay, my product key, there's customer ID. And I will also, because I know that my connection here is place to city, I will connect that up. We're not going to use that table, but I'll connect it up anyway. And it would have been fine by itself. So now we've got a good data model. If I come back, we can see that it's actually sorted itself out. So let's just move this over here, make this a bit bigger. Now obviously that card has gone behind, so if I just right click this, in fact what I'll do is I will minimize that so we can see the card. So the card gives us the total that's down here, and it's the total of these summed up. And what we've done is we've affected the context of that grid. The context without customers is show me all, the cost of everything, which is the 1.354. When I start adding other detail, the context changes. Okay, so the context now is company name and line cost. So for instance, Bonap is 23,850. There's no currency sign, but again, I can format that, and I can do that quite easily. So I'm on line cost here. I could go to format, and I could format, sorry, modeling, and I could do that if I wanted to. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create another page, and I'm just going to do a map. So let's just drop country on. So I've selected country, and basically because it's a geographical piece of information, it knows what a country is, it creates a map. I know other tools do that as well, but so does Power BI. And then I'm going to put my line cost. I'm going to select that. So now we get to see which country has actually made the most sales. So let's make that a bit wider. Let's zoom in a touch. Okay, so we can see Germany has made quite a lot of sales. Okay, cool. So I'm going to save that. Actually, I'm going to publish it to the cloud. So I'm logged into Power BI. I've got to save it first. So this is webinar 2-1. Save that. And I'm going to put it into a workspace. So a workspace is where you can group everything for a particular project together, for instance. Select webinar 2 and let it do. It doesn't take long to do. Okay, it's not got a huge amount to say. There's loads more I could show you here, but of course we've only got a 1 hour webinar. Okay, and I've got to be aware of that because I could go on for 4 days. And let's close that. And now I'm going to go back to Power BI. Okay, so this is the service, Power BI service. You can see favorites and frequencies. This is the one I use for training. All right, lots of stuff there. You can see some that we created for the previous webinar, which was this morning. And then we've got some others that I've been messing about with in the past. I saved that to a particular workspace. So at the moment I'm here on home. You can see there's others that I can go to. All right, so I can create, I can go to data sets. But if we go to my workspace, which was webinar 2, we've got our report and our data set. So if I click on webinar 2, we'll see the report that we just pulled up. Okay, I'm not overly happy with how that is, so I can actually go in, because I've got permissions to do so, I can go in, and if you look at what we're seeing, it's very similar to Power BI. So this is actually the Power BI service behaving like Power BI. So I can do this kind of editing work here. Okay, and lots of others that I can do as well, lots of other functions I can do. So I've just made that easier to see. Okay, so I can save it. So that report's been saved. I can pin it to a dashboard, all sorts of stuff. If I pin it to a dashboard here, then it pins all of those visuals. So if I go back to here, keep clicking on that one. If I go back to there, back to webinar 2, and then click back on here, we'll see that it has indeed changed, as you would expect. And then we've got our map as well, okay? So those are the tools. This little pin lets me pin the visual to a dashboard. So I'm going to pin this one. Let's pin it to a dashboard. A new dashboard, we're going to call it webinar 2. Click on pin. Okay, and the thing with dashboards, I'll just go to the dashboard. The thing with the dashboard is you can take visuals from all different projects, all different workbooks, because Power BI thinks of them as workbooks as well. So you can take visuals, and you can have visuals from different data sources, from different workbooks on a dashboard. On a report, you can't. Okay, so here I've got my line cost by company name. It's not very good because I've not got much space there. So I can click on it, and again, I can edit it. You know, you can do all this kind of work, and then we can make it a bit bigger. If I can click on it and get to the size of it, there we go. So just make it a bit bigger, make it a bit wider. Let's move this over here. I know it's going to hide behind a little bit. Click back on here, make it a bit wider. Save that. Go back to my webinar workspace. Back to my, so now it lists a dashboard. So let's click on the dashboard. And now I'll pull that down a bit as well. And so now, oops, pulled it too far. Sorry. There we go. That's better. So now I've got the ability to work with this. And in fact, I clicked on it, which meant it went back into design. So let's go back to the dashboard and sort this out. Just pull it down a bit, not too far. Okay. So we've got it a bit better there. Ask a question of your data. I've shown you what to do. I'll let you come in here and ask a question of your data. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. Notice it says chat in Teams. I can send a link to this to Teams, to a group within Teams. Okay, lots of stuff we can do here. If I just go back to there again, back to my workspace, I'll just mention a couple of things. So if I go to my data set, I can schedule a refresh here. If, for instance, it's Excel, it's on my laptop, I can then do my, so if I click on here, I can schedule my refresh, I can install a gateway, all sorts of stuff I can do. I'm not going to do any of that because it's slightly involved and advanced, but I'm just showing you where it is. Okay, so I can do that. I can also refresh it, refresh the data set, and then here I've got other things, analyze in Excel. So I can take it straight into Excel and have a look at it in Excel if I want. Create a new report from this data set, all sorts of cool stuff in here. Okay, but let's not get me sidetracked too much. Let me drop this down. So I'm actually going to come out of the demo now, and let's drop this down. Let's bring this back to here. Should resolve that. Excellent, good. I know what I'm doing, but I just like to double check. So this is an overview of the Power BI service. We've been in there. You can see the different workspaces, different things. This is a snapshot of my one, just when I actually wrote the webinar. Okay, so we've seen that. But there's a few other things that I want to talk about, some other topics here. So I mentioned downloading Power BI from Microsoft's website, from powerbi.com, or from the Microsoft Store. Remember, if you do it from the store, then it will install it every time it updates. Okay, we didn't work with a data warehouse there. We just worked with tables that were related. But you can connect to a data warehouse. You can create a star schema, a snowflake, for those of you who know what those are. Okay, you can create a date dimension. By default, Power BI gives you a date hierarchy, but it only goes down as far as the day, whereas with a date dimension, you can have all sorts of date-related information, even dates in Spanish, French, German, Italian, English. When I'm in Power Query, I'm using M. It creates M for me. I don't have to write the M language. You saw me write DAX for a calculated column. You can write calculated columns or measures. So calculated columns, as I said, they create a new column based on existing data. Measures don't create a new column, but they do appear in the fields list. So measures use less disk space than calculated columns. Okay, so you have to balance those things off. There are different types of measures, as you can see here. Measures that we create, automated measures that are created by Power BI, and then quick measures, which are wizard-based. Here's just an example of a calculated column. You saw me do order cost, which is, I called it line cost. Order cost equals order details quantity times order details unit price. With a calculated column, I don't have to refer to the table, sorry, because I'm creating it in that table. with a measure, I do have to refer to the table. So here I'm using the sum of the order details order cost, which is the sum of that calculated column. A list of resources that are available to you. These are ones that I found really useful. PowerBI.com is the service. And Microsoft have got a lot of learning tools on their own site as well. SQLBI.com, that's a guy in Australia. I think he's in Australia. Anyway, SQLBI is really cool. Kerbal is a Spanish lady in Sweden. She does some really great DAX videos. Guy in a Cube, they're two of the most well-known proponents of Power BI. I met them in Belgium. They're a great couple of guys. Obviously, docs.microsoft.com. Enterprise DNA, I think he's in Australia as well. That's another one. And then YouTube, tons and tons of resources. In fact, I'm giving you resources as a weight. I'll say hundreds and hundreds of thousands of resources. Lots of resources available to you, okay? Okay, so we're coming up to the questions part. I hope you found that useful. It was a quick potted tour of how we would approach a Power BI project. But Learning Tree do provide a set of resources for you. You can see the Learning Tree courses there. Analyzing data with Power BI, that's the 4-day intermediate course, leads to an exam, DA 100, which then leads to certification. I'm a great believer in education and certification and exams. I know many people don't believe in them, but I do believe in them. I think they show that you have the capabilities. And this is this exam searches out your weaknesses. So if you pass this exam, you've got a good amount of knowledge about Power BI. And then we've got the 1-day foundation and then advanced courses, which are really interesting, like dashboard in a day, paginated reports in a day, visualizations with Power BI, advanced modeling, etc. Paginated reports are really interesting because it's report builder that we used to use with SSRS, but we're doing paginated reports for Power BI. So I've done not bad. I'm only 2 minutes over. I shall now pass back to Darby, and we'll lead on to the questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. Great webinar. And I know we did have some questions during your presentation. So if you haven't asked your question yet, please do now. I've been jotting them down. But in the meantime, there's some polls that are going to be coming across. Feel free to answer those. Would love to learn more about your role within business intelligence and how you use Power BI. I know, John, you were mentioning the Power BI curriculum. Please note that we have some new bundles. So what you had mentioned there with the DA 100 certification, that we actually have a bundle that includes an exam voucher from Microsoft for that certification and includes those 1-day workshops, as well as some on-demand content. So some great stuff for you guys if you're interested. Feel free to visit the websites that you see there about data science bundles and Power BI curriculum. We'll also be sending you out an email about a complimentary access, and that is to our new data science social collaboration space. So you'll get access to on-demand resources, direct engagement from folks like John, our data science SMEs, and we'll even have live Q&A events. So keep an eye out on your email for that. I know there were a lot of technical difficulties, so I do apologize about that. Now, I guess there were some outage issues on the East Coast, at least here in the States, John, but I know for me personally, I was able to hear you loud and clear. So we will have this webinar available to everyone, either directly for download from our website, or we'll also have it available in your My Learning Tree account, which you can go to learningtree.com for that. All right, John, let's get to some of those questions. One of them that was asked, Chetan asked quite a few questions, which I absolutely loved. But Chetan asked, as well as another attendee here, is there a function within Power BI that does data cleansing, or is clean data a requirement prior to any analytics?
Okay, good question. So what I was doing in Power Query is data cleansing. Now, what I didn't have time to show you is that there is some data profiling capability within Power BI desktop as well. where you can actually see how clean your data is. I can't flick back because we're focusing on the questions now, but I'd love to show you that. But yeah, so that's where we do our data cleansing in Power Query. Okay, so you open up your data, you put it into Power Query, and so you connect to the data, you shape and cleanse the data, then you create your data visuals, and then or in fact, you create your model first, then you create your data visuals, and then you share your report. That's the steps that I mentioned in that slide. Okay, so great question. Yeah, there is a lot of data transformation and shaping capability.
Okay. And then one, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Kay is asking, does Power BI work with Alteryx as a source? Alteryx, maybe?
Alteryx. I've not used Alteryx as a source. I'd be surprised if it didn't. What I'll do is if you take that question, Darby, and then I'll respond to that question later.
Okay, perfect. Carmen has mentioned that Power BI Desktop can make the system slow. They had that experience and decided to remove it from their computer. And at that time, Power BI kept freezing up. Is that something that you've heard, or is it something maybe that's been fixed? Have you noticed?
I've not experienced that at all. I don't know how long ago that was, but all the Power BI that I've used, even the server Power BI, which is a different version, I've not had any slowing down.
Okay.
So I'm guessing what you're saying is that as a program, it was slowing down your system. I've not experienced that.
And let's see, I know Susan Broad had raised her hand, but didn't ask the question in chat. But Susan, if you want to, feel free to call us. You're welcome to call Learning Tree. We can try and help you out. But Carmen's asking, is there a connector available for the MySQL database environment? Cheatin replied yes, but do you have anything you want to add to that, John?
Yes, is the right answer. You'll find that all those kind of the databases that are well known, including MySQL, NoSQL, and Hadoop, and various others, they all have connectors. That's why I'd be surprised if there wasn't an Alteryx one. So yes is the correct answer.
James is asking, has any progress been made to save .pbix files without data in them so that the data is retrieved when the report is run rather than scheduling refreshes?
Okay, so there is a technique called direct query where you connect directly to your data source. There are limitations to it. It's not as limitation free as the way that Power BI brings the data in, and that's why it does it that way. There are certain data sources that it won't connect up to, but direct query is the answer. And you can have a hybrid, so you can have some that are direct queries, some that are not direct queries, some data sources that are, and some that aren't. Okay, so that way with direct query, every time the data is refreshed, it's
we actually had some more questions that we had some lovely webinar participants that were actually responding as well. So Daniel or Kimberly, I think your questions got answered by some of our other participants, but if you still have further questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Galina is asking, when you join tables, any option to select inner join or left-right join?
Okay, yes, you can change the join types, and that that might be important to your data. So you can change the join types when you make that connection. I took the defaults, which were inner joins, but you can change direction. You can do that.
It's pretty flexible, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, now Carmen had asked, writing actual SQL queries is allowed, and if so, where? Which I know you don't have your shared screen up anymore, but are you able to answer that?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I'll go back to share. Fortunately, I didn't close it, so let me bring this back up. I've got another version, so I can see that you can see this screen. Let me go back into Power BI Desktop. And the first thing I'm going to do is, if I go back to Home, And if I go into transform data, I'm just going to show, I'm sorry, I can't remember the person's name, but somebody was asking about data
Yes.
profiling. So if I come to view, and if I just put some of these on, so there's my column distributions. These are things that we often do with SQL when we're querying our data to find out how our data is behaving. So here you can see it's showing me that there are 12 distinct contact titles, 2 of them are unique. Okay, and if I come down to column profile, so now whatever column I click on, I get a profile here. So at the moment, I'm looking at a string type column, so I get string type information. If I find, in fact, let me go to order details. I'll go to quantity. Yeah, let's go to quantity, select that. So now I'm getting numerical type information. It's got averages, standard deviations, etc. And I get my value distribution. And there's also column quality. Okay, so we're getting to see the quality of that column as well. So there's all those things. And just to finish that the last bit, all of these in here, transpose, reverse, and all the other ones that we've got, such as remove columns, duplicate, etc. Those are all the transformation tools that we've got available to us. So that's just to give a more detailed answer to the previous question. But now let me go to here. I'll close and apply that. Get back into Power BI. Okay, let it do its stuff. Okay, so if I just go File, no, I don't want to do that. Sorry, I want to go to Get Data. So let's go to Get Data from SQL Server. Okay, so here, Advanced Options. So I can give my server name. I do have a server installed, but I'm not going to do that. It'll take too much time. But here I can give my server name. I can either give the database here or I can do it elsewhere. You can see I can import the data or I can have a direct query to SQL Server. I mentioned a direct query. That's where I'm going straight out to the data. The timeout, so how long will it try and pull the data back before timeout happens? And then the SQL statement, so I can type a SQL statement in here. Okay, and then it will pull back the data based on that SQL statement. Okay, so that's that question. So yeah, I'm tempted to go to SQL Server because that's one of my favorite tools, but I'm not going to, because that would be foolhardy. There's only 3
There
minutes
are
left
only
to go.
3 minutes.
And I'm sure there's more.
Yes,
questions.
there are quite a few. There are
So
some more that are more demo style. Maybe we can address those at another time. One person, Tom, had asked, what is the purpose of the card? But I think he got his question answered by another webinar member. Chris Talbot was asking, will you please show us how to set up the drill down? I don't know if that's a quick task or we should move on to another question with that one.
I mean, I can do that sometime as a demo for somebody, but it's probably not got enough time. It's not a difficult thing to do, but I'd need to set up the data and everything.
Tom's saying he didn't get his question answered. I apologize, Tom. He said, what is the purpose of the card?
Okay, so the card, that's what I've got here. You can see that it's giving me a 1.35. So for instance, if we had some metrics that were important to management, we can have cards that give us that. So for instance, this is my annual sales or the sales in this data set. Okay, so at the moment, it's all the sales in the data set. So 1.35 million. Perhaps if I go to filters, maybe I don't want it to be, maybe I just want it to be a single year or some part of the year, so I can actually filter that if I want to. But that's the main point of the card. The card is to show a value. It might be the sales amount of a single salesperson, it might be the total sales amount, it might be sales amount of categories, or it could be profit percentage. That's really
I like what Kimberly said.
Okay, and that's why
the bottom line, basically, what you're really trying to present.
And that's why I put that line.
Perfect.
Yeah. Exactly.
If your source files, and I think this is probably the last question I have time for, but if your source files are saved on OneDrive for business, then doesn't it refresh automatically every hour?
You can, yes. OneDrive for Business is a great tool for this kind of work. You're absolutely right. It gives you some really cool flexibility and it will refresh.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. OneDrive. So if you connect up to your data and it's on OneDrive, it's obviously in the cloud. Okay, so cloud to cloud, so it can refresh quite easily, and it will refresh.
Okay, we might have one more here.
Depending on how you
We
set
might
it
have
up.
time because this looks like another
Yeah.
yes/no type
Go for it.
question. Does modifying your tables, like removing columns, for example, affect the original tables?
That's a good question because some people get worried about this. No, Power BI, the data that you pull in has no connection, no write back connection to wherever the data source is. So those columns that I deleted or removed is the right word. I didn't delete them. I removed them from the Power BI project. So it doesn't write back. I've been reading lately of some tools that allow you to write back, but that's not the point of Power BI. Power BI is to take data and visualize it. If you start writing back, you're going to get data administrators and people, data-based administrators worried about, why you're writing back to databases, why you're writing back to files.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. We did rather have some other questions as well, so I'll make sure that we try and follow up with each of you. But I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you on our website soon and maybe participating in some of our Power BI training courses. So thanks so much again, John.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.